nervous after Elizabeth. I'm nervous after both of you. I was very nervous. First of all, I just want to say, first of all, I'm already emotional. Just hearing my friend's story, I've heard it before, it's really hard to hear and it's hard to put faces on stories. And I think we hear in the media, we read books, we read magazines, but then when you actually see a face and you see someone as beautiful as Coco, and you, from the outside, you would never know the pain that she's been through. And that's the hardest part, I think. Every single one of you being here today is a dream for me because, you know, my abuse started when I was 8 years old, and it lasted till I was 15. And almost every day there was some type of abuse, whether it was physical or sexual. And, you know, at 15 years old, I finally also, middle of the night, just was up watching TV Land and just felt something tell me, which I believe was my higher power, God, telling me, you have to tell somebody. You have to get out of this. If you don't, he's gonna kill you. You're gonna die. I have been threatened, you know, my entire life. And for as long as I can remember, at least, like Coco as well, I don't have much memory before 8 years old. So I knew that if I told, if he wasn't taken, and if I was not saved, I was going to be dead. If not myself, I was threatened that he would bury my brothers alive, my family, and I, of course, couldn't let that happen. And so that night, I didn't sleep at all. I was up all night long. And at 6:30 in the morning, I just finally jumped up, got out of bed, and got dressed. And I ran to school as fast as I could. Before that, backtrack a little bit, because of everything that had been happening to me, I was a cutter. I had severe bulimia and anorexia. I would go back and forth. And I had attempted suicide. I had tried overdosing, I had tried jumping in front of a train, and I had hung myself. All 3 times, something happened. I overdosed and took an entire bottle of pills, and I slept for 12 hours. And I woke up. That was it. That was all that happened. The second time, I tried jumping in front of, I was standing on the train track, and I was on the phone with my therapist at the time. And I still don't know to this day. I was wearing like flat shoes, and I lost my balance on the train track and rolled as the train came. Third time, it was about a couple weeks before I finally reported, I tried hanging myself, and the rope literally snapped in half. And I remember being so pissed. And I was like, I'm such a mess up. I can't even kill myself, right? Like, what the heck is happening? Like, why can't I do this? Why can't I succeed? And I was so angry at God, and I was so angry at the world, and I just did not want to be here anymore. I didn't understand. And at that moment, I remember saying, there has to be a purpose. There has to be a purpose why I'm here. Why I can't die? Why am I supposed to be here? What do you want me here for? And I remember praying to God and asking, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I just can't. And so, again, I got up in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning, and I ran to school as fast as I could. I went into school and told a friend who I think she had been reported that she had been molested or something, so I knew that something had happened to her, and I told her I needed her help. She took me to, from what I remember, it's kind of a blur. Again, something took over me that day and gave me the strength and courage, so I don't really remember what I said or anything. But I reported it to a teacher that I had felt really comfortable with during that school year. She had actually helped me call the suicide line. She was by my side. She's actually here tonight, and she is the one who reported it. That day, because of, you know, this cutting and all the things I was going through, Desi was just being dramatic. Desi was a drama queen. That was kind of what I was told at school. My teacher told the counselor at school, and they said, she's probably lying, she's just being dramatic. And told her, they didn't want to call, they didn't want to do anything, and luckily she stood her ground and said, that's not our job. Our job is to report it, and that's what we're gonna do. And made them call. The detective came, and I remember the detective came, she sat down with me, and I was terrified. Because again, I knew that if I went home, they sent me home, and he knew that I reported it, that'd be the last of me. She sat down with me and she said, your counselor doesn't think that this is true. She doesn't think that what you're saying is true. She thinks you're just saying it for attention. I need you to tell me. And I looked at her and I said, I need you to help me. I can't go home. And I remember she grabbed my hand and she said, okay, I believe you. And that day was the day that I was saved, I guess. I was rescued. It took a while. It wasn't as easy as that. He wasn't arrested right away. They had to do, I do a lie detector test. I had to do a DNA test. I had to do a bunch of different things. And once they got that, then finally he was arrested. It was a long court process. I finally had to go to court. I tried to testify. At this point, before I even had reported, I knew my mental health wasn't right. But it had just kind of deteriorated from the day I reported. You think that you feel safe and excited that you're like not in that situation anymore, but I think because, you know, my entire life, the funny thing is half my family's here today, okay? And we are a very close family. They're my rock. And all the time people are like, well, how did your family not know? Because he was good at what he did. He was a good manipulator, and I had to become a good liar. That was my survival mechanism. If I didn't become a good liar, then I knew it was either my life or someone I loved. And so I was great at putting on a face. My entire life I was, you know, smiling, and nobody had any idea that this was happening. So at the court, I finally just couldn't handle anymore. I tried to testify, had basically a meltdown in the courtroom, and ran out. I don't remember anything but being on my knees and just sobbing. And the security guy that stands next to the judge came out and got me, and he said, the judge wants you to come back in. And I remember it was the hardest thing because the person that was the monster, like she said, in my bed, was right there, 10 feet away from me, but in handcuffs and in shackles. And I remember, even though that was happening, I remember like just being terrified and not knowing, like, I just know this isn't over. Like, this just can't be over. He always told me that I'd never be free and that I'd always belong to him and I would never live a normal life. And so the judge looked at me, and luckily I had an amazing judge, and she said, I want you to watch me put this man away for hurting you. And so she sentenced him. Unfortunately, because things hadn't happened for about a week, I didn't have any actual DNA at the moment, so he only got 3 to life. He ended up being in prison for 10 years, not for what he did to me, but because he actually got attempted murder for one of his cellmates. What he did to me was about 3 or so years is what he got. He was released in 2015. At this point, again, because of the mask I was so good at putting on, I just went, excuse me, if there's a fly on my face. At 15, like I said, is when he finally was put in prison. At that point, I had completely lost it. My relationship with my mom, I was angry with my mom. I was angry with my whole family, and not because of anything they did, but because I just needed to be angry. I just needed to be angry at someone. I was so angry at the world. I didn't understand. I was always told, you know, God's protecting you and these things can't happen, but yet they were happening in my life, and I just didn't understand what I did wrong. Like, why is this happening to me? And I didn't understand that it was so common. I had never had one conversation or heard it happen to anybody. So I felt like I was alone. At school, I went to school and I tried going back to school, and I was told a mean girl yelled in the hallway that he likes to have sex with her dad. And that was done. I was done with school at that point. I ended up going in a treatment program, and I was in a residential treatment program for 2 years. I lost 2 years of my life. For 2 years of my life, I lived basically in the hospital, behind doors and a locked down facility. I tried to kill myself there because I couldn't live that way. It didn't make sense to me. At that point, I started, the way that my brain handled it is at one point, I started to disassociate. So I ended up being diagnosed with, many people know it as dissociation identity disorder, which most people know as multiple personality disorders. I myself don't have the multiple personality part, but what would happen is I would be sitting there. I don't know if anybody ever watched That's So Raven, but where she would have a vision and kind of like stare off into space. And that's kind of how my therapist would explain it, is I would just be sitting there and I would just go into a zone and I would completely disconnect. And when I would come back, I would be 8 years old, 9 years old. I talked like I was 8 years old. I cried in the corner for my mom like I was 8 years old. I thought he was hurting me. I would be on the floor, literally not able to get up because in my head he was holding me down. I would come out of it hours later and I'd have no recollection of what happened. I'd have no idea what happened to me. I'd come out of it and my wrists would hurt like I was being pulled down. They said like my face would turn blue as if someone was suffocating me because in my head it was actually happening, so my body was reacting as if it was happening. It's very rare, less than 2% of the entire world has it. And again, kind of one of those things where I was like, why me? Like, how am I gonna live like this? I remember at one point, they called my mom more than once and sat her down and said, Desi will never be normal. She'll live in a mental hospital for the rest of her life. She'll never be able to drive a car. She'll never be able to go to school. She'll never be able to be married or have a normal life. She will be in and out of, in a mental hospital her entire life. I was a statistic. I was not supposed to be normal and live a normal life, whatever that means, normal. So after being in treatment for 2 years, I finally got out and was released, whatever, decided to move to New Mexico at 17 years old. Just decided I didn't want to be in Utah anymore. I have family over there, and decided to move there. That's where I met my incredible husband. I don't know where he is. He's somewhere out over there. That was hard because after being abused by men your entire life, you don't trust anybody. I didn't ever think that there was a man other than my grandfather. That was about the only man I truly trusted. And I met my husband, and I honestly think he saved my life. I stuck around, lived there for a year, and moved back to Utah a year later. During that time, I literally did not tell anybody my story. Nobody knew except for my family. For years, that was the case. Unless you were like a childhood friend, you didn't know anything. And the only reason you knew anything happened to me was because I was kind of disappeared for 2 years. My partner now, Tamika, has known me my entire life, and she didn't know, and I kind of just dropped off the face of the earth, and that was it. And so like I said, I just kind of kept everything to myself, never told anyone. If you don't talk about it, then it didn't happen. It's kind of the way I processed everything. And like I said, in 2015, my stepfather was released. It all came back. My daughter was just born. She was only a few months old. And I remember getting the call that he was being released, and I remember being so confused. Like, how could he be released? Like, I don't understand. And in my heart, I knew again that it wasn't over. Years, like I said, with avoiding what had happened to me, I finally just lost it. My marriage was falling apart. I couldn't have a normal relationship. I couldn't have a relationship with my family. I kind of pushed everyone away. I was angry again. All of these things came coming back. And I was so confused why. Well, I went to treatment for 2 years. How is this happening again? Well, because I went to treatment as to survive. I didn't go, treatment wasn't my healing. It wasn't where I had my healing. It was to basically get me to become an adult, and that was basically it. And so, yes, it saved my life, but it wasn't where I healed. And so, at that point, I started, going to see the counselor and therapist, and all this started coming back up. Well, like I told you before, when I was younger, I would ask, as I was being abused, I would be like, why is this happening to me? What am I doing? How can you help me? Why aren't you helping me? Asking so many questions I was so confused on. And one day, it kind of just hit me. Honestly, I can't explain what it was again. I just knew I needed to tell my story. I don't know what it was. After my daughter was born, when he was released, like I said, because I kind of relapsed and lost it for a minute, I hadn't been on medication since I got out of treatment. So when I left treatment, I left with a freezer bag full of medication that I was supposed to take daily. I completely, cold turkey, do not do that, do not recommend that. Cold turkey stopped taking every single medication. And I wasn't on anything until 2015. So for 10 years, I didn't take anything. And then I realized I needed it. I needed it to be a good mom. At this point, I had a little boy and a little girl. And I did not want to be that for them. I did not want generational trauma to continue. I needed to stop it. I did not want my trauma to affect my children. That was my biggest fear. My mom was abused physically, and I didn't want that to happen to my kids. You know what I mean? I didn't want, because my mom didn't get the help that she needed at the time because it wasn't around really back then. And so then things happened to me, and I didn't want that to happen to my child as well, my children as well. So at one point, I finally just, I prayed about it, and I thought about it, and I was like, what should I do? And like I said, many people would say, when they would hear my story, they would go, holy crap, you need to write a book. You need to do a blog. You need to do something. I tried all those things, and nothing ever felt right. Until my husband came home one day, and he says, I just listened to the Elon Musk podcast. You should do a podcast. Never listened to a podcast ever. And I was like, okay. So I looked into it, went and I had a cheap HP laptop, literally went and got one of those little ball microphones, and I sat in my closet and I recorded my story. That was the beginning when everything, I think, changed. The next day, I woke up and my story had over 7,000 something in less than 12 hours. And I was so confused. Whoa, where did this come from? I'm so confused. Why are people listening to this? And honestly, I just thought it would be my friends, my family. I did not think people would be interested in my story. And from there, that's why, like I said, when it clicked, and I was like, holy crap. This is needed. There's not things like this out there. I don't know very many other survivors that have been through things like I have. Why isn't this talked about more? And so I started talking to more people and realizing it was something that was needed. And so that's where I started my podcast, Candle in a Dark Room. People always ask me, why is it called that? I'm sure you can figure it out. It's kind of self-explanatory. But I think for me, I could go to treatment. I could talk to my family. I could talk to my teacher that I'm good friends with. I could talk to my best friend. I could do all those things, but that wasn't enough. That wasn't where my healing came in. And so I knew I needed to actually have a safe space, but if I needed a safe space, then other people needed a safe space. Because let's be honest, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about what happened with my family because I know it hurts them. And so I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't talk to them about it. And so I knew other people needed that. So like I said, with everything I went through, I could have done drugs. I could have done all types of things to numb myself. But thank goodness I didn't. Thank goodness I always in the back of my head knew. I had drugs in front of me at some points in my life and all types of things. And I remember always hearing a voice in my head don't go there. You go there, it's it. You're gonna be free from everything going on in there. You'll never be able to get out of it. And so, like I said, I had to, at one point, literally look within myself and guide myself out of the darkness. It wasn't anybody else's job. Nobody else could save me. I could only save myself. And it's just like that with any type of addict or anybody. We can sit there and try to help them all day, take them to rehab, do all those things. But until they're ready to heal, it wasn't gonna happen. And so that was the case for me. So that's where Candle in a Dark Room came from. I kind of picture it as I was in a dark cave and there was one flickering candle that I had for years to go through this tunnel and to find my escape. And I finally did. So like I said, I started talking to other people, and not only was that healing for them, but it was healing for me because it actually started to heal me, and I started seeing holy cow, this is actually changing people. And people would leave my recording room and crying and like just the weight lifted off their shoulders. It was just the coolest thing to see because, you know, a lot of them would say, I've never told my story. I've never said this out loud. And not only did I say it out loud, but I am putting it out there. I'm putting it out there for other people to hear. And so that's, like I said, where Candle and Dark Room came from. So from that, the podcast kind of just blew up from there. I was able to interview some I've interviewed celebrities, I've interviewed, you know, all types of different survivors, mental health, all types of different things. And then about a year ago, again, I kind of felt that in my head, something else, that you have something else, this isn't it, this isn't your purpose. And so, I forgot to mention this part, I have been a counselor and crisis worker for about 12 years now. Even though I didn't tell people about my trauma, I went into the field because that was how I coped with it. Because if I help other people, then that helps me. As long as I help other people out of their darkness and other people through their trauma, then that's fine. I didn't think I needed to work on mine until everything happened in 2015. So, like I said, I was a crisis worker at the University of Utah, and I was just at work one day, and I was on a call. I had a girl who had just been raped, and you know, people ask me all the time also, how do you like go and sit with somebody after they've just been raped and do this after everything you've been through? But I remember at one point just like in the bathroom, because of course you don't want to like have a breakdown in front of them. So I went to the bathroom and was like crying, and I was just like picturing everything this girl went through, and I was like trying to figure out how to help her and what to do and what to say, because I was always scared to say the wrong thing. And I just, like I said, in my heart, I knew there had to be something else. I had to start something for people. She had no family to go to. I had to hold her hand during her rape kit. She had no mom to call. She had no sister to call. She had nobody to call. And so I sat there and held her hand while she went through her rape kit, or her rape exam, excuse me. And so that was the day where I was just like, we gotta figure something out. I need to start an organization. And so luckily, my, again, longtime friend, Tamika, our moms actually went to high school together. She was in my mom and dad's wedding. Her mom was in my mom and dad's wedding. We hadn't really talked in years. She contacted me on Facebook and was like, I heard your podcast. How can I help? What can I do? Again, I had been doing the editing by myself, the recording, so I was like, oh my gosh, yes, please, let's come help me. I need help. I was so overwhelmed at that point. And I don't know, I mean, honestly, I always say that she's my brain because I'll just brain dump on her. Like, we'll sit there for an hour and I just, this is everything I want to do. And luckily, she's really good at taking notes. And so she just listens and helps me like figure out what my goals are and what my dreams are. And that's kind of how we started the organization. And then I actually hired beautiful Sarah here to be my life coach about, how long ago, 6 months ago?
Longer than that.
Maybe a little over longer than that. Yeah. And it's funny because I remember we sat down the first time, she's like, what do you want to do? Like where, because the reason I hired her is I was like, I have so many dreams and I have no idea where to start. I was like in a big puddle of water and had no idea like where to go. And I remember I told her, she's like, whoa, okay, hold on. Let's figure out where you're gonna start, how you're gonna do this. And so like I said, I just kind of started telling her, I wanna have retreats of women that need healing and to like sit down together. You know, there's AA, there's all these things for people that have addiction issues and all these things. But why isn't there like groups for survivors? Why isn't there groups for you to sit down and talk to somebody who's been through what you've been through? And you know, there's some that are like in hospitals that are, you know, those type of groups, but nothing that's actually accessible to the public. And so, like I said, I told her I want to have retreats, I want to do workshops, I want to become a public speaker, and I just listed like 15 things. And it honestly has all just happened. Like I can't even tell you how it happened. The reason kind of this whole thing's happened now is I was here with my mom. She's the one who owns the beverage bar, and so she's working with she's working with the Wild Oak. And I was here with them. I think my mom told Carly my story or something about what I did with my organization. And I wasn't an organization yet, by the way. I was just kind of figuring out what I was going to be. And they came to me and they're like, well, we did a thing for Underground Railroad last year. We would love to do an event for you. And I had just that week before, like not even a week, it was like days. And I was like, I want to do a retreat. I just need to find a venue, but like they're too expensive, so I hopefully can find someone that would offer. I just need to talk to people. And then like it came to me. So I remember calling Sarah, and she was like, holy shit, like, what? And it was the everybody's thinking, like, I don't know how that just happened, like, what is happening? And so that happened. Then, also when we had our talk about what I wanted to do, I always wanted to meet Elizabeth Smart. And I think because we're the same age, at the same time my stuff was going on, she had just been rescued. And so it was like, oh, so there is other people that are, this kind of stuff's happening too. So she was a super big influence for me of like, okay, if she could tell and she still has the support of her family, then I can tell and my family's still gonna love me too, right? And so it was just a dream. Then literally like less than 2 weeks later, I get invited to Elizabeth Smart's opening for her gym. And I got the email and I was like, whoa, what is going on? This is the craziest thing. So it literally just kind of happened that way. At the Elizabeth Smart thing, I actually reached out to Coco about a year prior and we just couldn't connect because Instagram, you know, it's hard to get in touch with people on Instagram that don't know you. She was there at the Elizabeth Smart thing. And so like both the people that I had been trying to talk to were in the same room. There's only like 8 of us. It was, this is the craziest thing. Like what is happening? And we all just talked and they knew. I remember walking in, they were like, and Elizabeth's like, oh, you're Desi from Candle Dark Room. And I was like, whoa, she knows who I am. That's so weird. Like I just remember I've just been totally shocked by how this whole thing has happened. And as I've learned, you know, it's not by coincidence. It's all some type of, it's meant to be in some way or the other. And now I have 2 amazing, beautiful survivor friends, Elizabeth and Coco, who I can go to and be like, okay, how do you guys handle this? How do you do this? Because it's hard. Like Coco said, it's hard out there. Life doesn't get easier. It gets harder. More trials happen. You know, I lost my dad a year ago, and that brought up more trauma for me of grief and fear and like, oh my gosh, my dad's gone, I'm 31 years old, like what? And it's just so many different things have continued to happen in my life that have been trauma. And so the way everything has just happened has just been, I believe God, I believe it's meant to be, and I believe that's why I'm here. I think I now know what my purpose is in life, and I didn't know that until recently. And I remember literally looking in the mirror and telling myself, this is why you're here. This is your purpose, to help people like this. Oh, also, last thing, this is important because I had also told her I wanted to be a coach. 2 girls contacted me within that same week and said, hey, would you be my coach? Oh, this was like, again, never had an experience. And I was like, I have no idea what that means yet, but I'll figure it out. And I did. I totally just figured it out. And it's worked. And 2 of them are here today, so I'm grateful that they're here. They all flew in, both of them flew in from out of state. But, you know, I remember, like I said, being young and having no hope that I would ever be free. Like I said earlier, how my stepfather was released, and 2 years ago I got a call from an FBI agent saying that he had been caught with child pornography. He was in a halfway house and he'd been caught with child pornography. And there were over 200 pictures of me with my face cut out and put on every single picture. My face now, my face with the park with my children, my face on the doorstep of my house, my face in the parking lot at my work when I worked at the University of Utah. And he had put my face on vulnerable, exploited children. And I was devastated. And I had, again, just started Candle Dark Room, and I was like, how is this happening? Like, I finally get the courage to help and like tell my story. And I feel like I feel like a fraud. Like, how can I sit there and help survivors and tell them all this stuff when I'm still being victimized, when this is still happening? And so it took me a second to kind of process everything, but then after a couple days, I realized like, this is bullshit. I'm pissed. Like, this is it. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna do something. I'm going to court. I'm gonna fight him like he's going to prison this time. I'm gonna save those those little kids that were in those pictures. I'm gonna, even though I can't save them personally, I'm gonna do whatever I can to save them from going through what I went through. And so last July, I went to court, and it was actually last Friday, was the 1-year anniversary. And I had court, and I had to face him. It was on Zoom because of COVID, and so it was kind of weird. I could see like him right in front of me. I don't think he could see me. I'm pretty sure they had the screen off, but I said everything I wanted to say 15 years ago, and everything I wanted to say now. And that was the day I realized I'm teaching these young boys and girls and these women to take their power back. Now, even though you're a victim, even though these things happen to you, you can be the survivor, but you have to choose to be. You can be a victim your entire life and choose to sit in that, or you can choose to be a survivor and use your story for good. All the time, people say, oh, you went through this for a reason. This is part of your journey. This was God's purpose for you. I don't believe that's true. I believe people have free will in this world, and people choose to hurt us. People choose to make those choices. And when they choose to make those choices, that's when your higher power intervenes and says, okay, now that this happened, you're gonna use this for good. We're gonna make this your purpose. This is what you're here for. And so again, that's why I started Counter Dark Room. Now, my purpose is to give a voice to the young girl that's, at the restaurant with her stepdad, where nobody has any idea what's happening. And she's sitting behind there with a smile on her face, but nobody knows that she's being raped every single night. That nobody knows that she's being punched in her ribs so hard that she can't breathe, but she has to put a shirt on to cover it because no, she doesn't want questions. I want to save the girl who's binging and purging because she hates herself so much and is trying to get out all the negative things that have happened to her, and she takes it on her. It's the only thing she has control of. I want to give young boys and girls that power. I want to tell them that they can take their power back. After no matter what has happened to you, there is a candle in that dark room that's going to help guide you out. Whether that's yourself, whether that's somebody that you know that's going to help you guide you out of that tunnel, whether it's God, whether it's your higher power, no matter what it is, if you look hard enough and you're patient and you know that there's a reason that you're here, which everyone's here for a reason, then you can find the light to guide you out of that darkness. So again, that's why we're here tonight. Part of the things that, like Candace said, we're partnering up to do, Candle Dark Room will do her aftercare program, where when these women and boys are rescued, I'll come in and teach them. I have a course called Finding Purpose in Your Trauma, because again, we've all been through something. We've all had some type of trauma, whether it's small t or little t, right? And so I believe that if you find your purpose for what you went through, it doesn't have to be a podcast, it doesn't have to be anything like huge. It can literally just be to save your neighbor down the street, to tell your friend at that school that she's worth it and that she can have the strength to get out of whatever she's going through. That can be your purpose in this world. And we all have one. We all have one, and some of us don't want to face it because it's hard. It's hard to know these things are happening. It's hard to know that people are being killed for trying to get help, that people are seeing loved ones get killed, and it's hard to know that people are getting kidnapped just to be sex slaves, just to be, trafficked by people that should love them and be there for them. And so we're going to be doing the aftercare program. But one of the other things that I think is so important is, my mom did everything she could to help me. She was a single mom, and she went into debt. She went into, you name it, and she did it. She did it, and she, I can't even tell you how much just to put me in that rehab for 2 years, because that's what I needed. That's what she felt I needed to survive, to live. Because imagine. For me, it's hard because I know it hurts her, that what happened to me. And so that's another thing too, is people always say, well, how do you have a good relationship with your family and your mom? And I know that my family didn't know. I know my mom has always been there for me. She's been there for me from day one. And when she went into debt, she worked 3 jobs. She did everything she could to make sure I was in this treatment program. And it's hard. Some parents can't do it. Some parents can't afford it. And that's where we're coming in, our scholarship program. Candle Dark Room is now going to be offering a scholarship program where we will pay for hopefully our goal is 3 to 5 per year, but we're going to be paying for a year's worth of medication, treatment, therapy, whatever it is that's needed for long-term healing. Healing is a lifelong process. Coco and I are never going to wake up and say, we're better, we're free, we have no trauma, everything's fine. That's not how it works. We are for the rest of our lives going to have to face the demons that are in our head from everything that happened. We're going to have to deal with the memories. We're going to have to deal with the flashbacks and the experiences and everything because of what happened to us. But there is hope in that, because even though we have to deal with this, we can still live a good life. I've been married for 11 years next month. I have 2 beautiful children that I was told by doctors I should never have because my body was too damaged. I was never supposed to have more than any children at all. There is hope. You can get the help, and that's what we're trying to offer. So you guys being here tonight is my dream, and bringing my dream to life, and I am so grateful. I have people here from Chicago, Philadelphia, California, you name it, and I have just an amazing support system. But just the biggest thing is just know that this stuff is happening. It's happening in our backyard. It's happening. You never know who it's happening to. be a light for somebody, because you could be the light that they need to guide them out of the darkness. Whether it's being a teacher at school that just is there to hold your hand while you cry, whether it's your therapist and they're just listening to you, or whether it's your best friend and they just need someone to talk to. Be that light. Let them know that they're enough. Let them know they're loved. Let them know that they don't deserve anything that's happened to them, and let them know that they're worth being here, and that their abuse isn't why they're here. It's not what they're here on this earth for. So thank you guys all for being here, and I love you.